Globalist kingpins and their lackeys from across the Western world are meeting in Dresden, Germany, this week for the shadowy and deeply controversial 2016 Bilderberg Summit. If past statements by Bilderberg bigwigs are to be believed, the collection of powerful internationalists and lower-level figures they hope to influence will be plotting against the interests of their home countries, under the guise of fostering transatlantic informal discussions. As usual, paranoid Bilderberg attendees will be huddled behind armies of taxpayer-funded police and security protections, as if they had something to hide. But based on the surging levels of media interest, the secrecy traditionally associated with the gathering appears to be slowly eroding. From globalist prime ministers and extremist politicians to bailed-out mega-bankers, accused war criminals, establishment journalists, and unelected rulers of the European Union superstate, many of the world's most unpopular people will be there. More than a few prominent Americans will be in attendance, too, despite the Logan Act that some critics say could make their scheming a felony. Among the U.S. attendees are multiple establishment media journalists, neocon warmonger Senator Lindsey Graham, RSC, Google boss Eric Schmidt, globalist schemer Henry New World Order Kissinger, disgraced former CIA boss and Al-Qaeda cheerleader David Petraeus, and many more. The official list, which often leaves key attendees off, is available on Bilderberg's website. As usual, the list of topics for the confab is vague to the point of being meaningless. Among the subjects listed on the official Bilderberg press release are current events, China, Middle East, Russia, cybersecurity, and technological innovation. Also on the agenda is Europe, migration, growth, reform, vision, unity. The United States and various issues, listed on the official release as U.S. political landscape, economy, growth, debt, reform, will be discussed, too. Finally, geopolitics of energy and commodity prices was also listed as one of the topics for discussion. Several leaders of big oil companies, including BP and Shell, were on the official list of attendees. Also listed as a discussion topic was the middle class and the precariat, an obscure term to describe people living without financial security created by combining the words precarious and proletariat. The concept is associated with the work of far-left British economist Guy Standing, who appears on this year's list of Bilderberg attendees. The University of London professor is a leading proponent of making everyone dependent on government by imposing even more crushing taxes on working people in order to provide every person with a guaranteed universal basic income. Standing founded the Basic Income Earth Network, BIN, to push the plot. While the scheme was overwhelmingly crushed by voters in a Swiss referendum last weekend, the radical idea is gaining support among globalists and establishment types. Despite the official list of topics, analysts such as Paul Joseph Watson of InfoWars, who is on the ground in Dresden and his years of experience covering the Bilderberg summits, suggested that the real subjects for this year's gathering would include more than just what is publicly acknowledged. Among other topics, Watson said the globalist attendees would discuss how to stop GOP presidential candidate Donald Trump, who has spoken out publicly against globalism and the illegal wars fomented by many of the regular Bilderberg attendees. Also apparently on the agenda, how to keep the tsunami of Middle Eastern and African immigrants flowing into the West amid surging public opposition across the Western world, as evidenced by Trump's popularity and various populist uprisings in Europe. Of course, considering the admitted role of Bilderberg meetings in imposing the autocratic superstate on Europeans, there will almost certainly be a discussion on Brexit as British voters prepare to go to the polls this month to vote on secession from the increasingly unpopular EU. In 2009, then Bilderberg chairman Eshijn de Weignen, a former European Union commissar and the Belgian Minister of State at the time, told the online EU Observer that the secretive summits helped create the controversial euro currency imposed on 17 formerly sovereign European nations. Much evidence also suggests that the summits played a major role in foisting the EU superstate on the peoples of Europe against their will, using deception and lies. More than a few top EU globalists will be in attendance. Among them, former Maoist revolutionary and EU President José Manuel Barroso, who loudly demanded a federal regime to rule over formerly independent European nations, despite the fact that public support for the scheme has evaporated. Also attending will be European Central Bank bosses, European Commission Vice President Kristalina Georgieva, and even a member of the EU's largely impotent pseudo-parliament. 2 European prime ministers and the deputy prime minister of the Islamic Turkish government, which globalists are plotting to merge into the EU, are also listed as attendees. In its now annual press release for 2016, the Bilderberg website again downplayed the meeting and the paranoid secrecy that surrounds it. Founded in 1954, the Bilderberg Conference is an annual meeting designed to foster dialogue between Europe and North America. The statement reads, "In as non-threatening a manner as possible, cue soft music." Every year, between 120–150 political leaders and experts from industry, finance, academia and the media are invited to take part in the conference. About 2/3 of the participants come from Europe and the rest from North America, approximately 1/3 from politics and government and the rest from other fields. According to the release, the conference is just a forum for informal discussions about major issues facing the world. However, the meetings are held under what is known as the Chatham House rule, swearing all participants to secrecy regarding the identities and affiliations of the people they receive information from. Thanks to the private nature of the conference, the participants are not bound by the conventions of their office or by pre-agreed positions, the statement continues. As such, they can take time to listen, reflect and gather insights. There is no desired outcome, no minutes are taken and no report is written. Furthermore, no resolutions are proposed, no votes are taken, and no policy statements are issued. Somebody, however, is clearly lying. In 2010, for example, former NATO boss and two-time Bilderberg attendee Willy Klaas said in a radio interview that reports of speeches given at the summit are, in fact, compiled. The participants are then obviously considered to use this report in setting their policies in the environments in which they affect, Klaas added. Analysts said the bombshell was essentially an admission that Bilderberg attendees are secretly plotting your future behind closed doors. More than 15 years ago, far-left Bilderberg attendee Will Hutton, a former British newspaper editor, rabid pro-EU extremist, and vehement opponent of American conservatism, also hinted at the influence of the gathering. Bilderberg is one of the key meetings of the year, he wrote in 1998. The consensus established is the backdrop against which policy is made worldwide. Another key globalist banker and Bilderberg bigwig is David Rockefeller, who boasted in his memoirs of conspiring with a secret cabal to create one world. In a statement he made at the Bilderberg meeting in 1991 that was obtained by French intelligence and leaked to the press, Rockefeller praised the globalist lackeys in the media for keeping their readers and viewers in the dark about the agenda. We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time magazine and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years, Rockefeller said. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the lights of publicity during those years. But the world is more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national auto-determination practiced in past centuries. This year, as usual, plenty of self-styled journalists and opinion molders will be in attendance, although you will not be hearing about the summit from them. Among the American establishment media personalities on this year's list is NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel. Bloomberg editor-in-chief John Micklethwaite and Bloomberg View columnist Meghan McArdle will be there, too. Wall Street Journal columnist Peggy Noonan and Washington Post columnist Ann Applebaum are on the list as well. Plenty of European establishment media bosses will also be there. Among them, Editor-in-Chief Zanny Minton Beddoes with The Economist, Chief Economics Commentator Martin Wolf with The Financial Times, Editor-in-Chief and anchor Otto E. Mezzo on Italy's La 7 TV Lily Gruber, Editorial Director Eshine Gurnell with French newspaper Le Point, and others. The Bilderberg agenda officially remains secret, and little information on the secrecy-obsessed summit is likely to emerge. However, it is becoming increasingly clear that the goals include whittling away at what remains of self-government, fundamentally transforming America and Europe, and the world, building up and empowering globalist institutions, and more, at least among the upper-level figures who orchestrate the meetings to advance their agenda. In short, as this magazine has documented in the past, Bilderberg is essentially a secret meeting of big business and big government. And you can be sure that, unless you are part of the self-styled global elite, they are not working for you or in your